Hello everyone. So the first talk of the day today is by Gopal Kiran, the Director of Financial Services of Deloitte. The topic for the talk is the state of fintech innovation in Asia, leading the global financial paradigm shift. So over to you, Gopal.
Thanks, Jagrati and Ajay, for having me here. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Malaysia and, in fact, Southeast Asia. Um, uh, so, in the next 15 to 20 minutes, I would like to give a perspective of what's happening with respect to fintech in the ASEAN market. So, to quickly introduce myself, as Jagrati mentioned, I've worked very closely with the fintech players in the region. Try to build the relationship with the fintechs and corporates, and how we can solve some of the corporate problems with fintech, and how we can help fintech to build scale. So these are some of the things which I day to day work with. So in this 15-20 minutes presentation, I will give you a perspective of what's happening in the ASEAN. What are some of the sectors which are getting booming? I see some of the questions from other members on which sector is booming in Southeast Asia or ASEAN markets. I'll try to give a perspective, and then I will also share where is some of the collaboration happening, and the new digital banks that are coming up in the ASEAN markets, which are really making it very exciting in the Southeast Asia region. Hope you can all see my screen. Moving to the next screen, I think as we all aware and conscious of the fact, Southeast Asia, or in fact ASEAN, has become the fintech hotspot for a lot of fintech innovation for multiple reasons. Because we have the one of the highest population in the region. And then there's a lot of internet and mobile penetration. In fact, for some of the countries, the mobile penetration is higher than the internet penetration. The average number of devices held by the citizens, for example, in Malaysia, is 3 devices. So that shows the kind of influence smart devices or something have on the people. And then, as some of the other panel members or speakers have mentioned, so although Southeast Asia or ASEAN markets are closely connected, just an ocean away in between these countries, but from a regulatory or a geographical distribution, it's quite different. And then there's a lot of unserved or underserved community in the Southeast Asia market. For example, the SME financing adoption in the markets like, say, Vietnam, Indonesia, or something, are less than 40% if you compare with. So the penetration rates are really less. And few of the markets like, say, Singapore, Malaysia, the financial inclusion is doing good, close to Singapore around 90%, and Malaysia is around some 85%. So, but in rest of the other markets, there's a lot of penetration required. So, which all gives a very interesting perspective of what Southeast Asia or ASEAN can offer. So, going into specific details of what exactly are the numbers we are talking about for ASEAN market. If any fintech who wants to come to Southeast Asia, what are some of the population they can leverage on? You can see from here, like we South ASEAN represent around 647 million population. There's an increasing penetration with respect to internet users, mobile users, active media users. Say, for example, some around 13.3 hours is the average time spent by a Malaysian on internet. And then so if you look at urbanization, it's getting very popularly increasing in Southeast Asia. And then of all the population in Southeast Asia, for example, or ASEAN, 39% come from Indonesia market. So that really shows how much is the scale any fintech company can come from the ASEAN market. Getting into broader details of, I think, as we all see globally, we also have the similar kind of fintech disruption that is happening in ASEAN markets, giving a perspective. There are so many areas that are getting disrupted, be it payments, lending. Some of the institutions are working on blockchain, both central banks and corporates. AI, many of the banks and insurance companies are using it. Some of the countries are getting famous for the marketplace. For example, Indonesia is getting very popular with the marketplace. Robo-advisory and wealth management. Singapore is picking up on the robo-advisory. Malaysia and Indonesia is working on Islamic way of robo-advisory. So, of all the fintech I see in the ASEAN market, there are two areas that are getting very disrupted heavily, which is one is on the payments, both on retail and B2B and all the e-wallet that is getting heavily disrupted. In fact, if I look at the percentage, around 40% of all the fintech players, if you look at any of the country in the Southeast Asia, excluding Singapore, they all come from the payments background. Rest come from the lending background. So the lending and payments constitute around 60 to 65% um, of the fintechs that constitute from this side of the countries. So, I mean, insurtech and all, it's picking up. There are few popular insurtech players in the market who have successfully raised money during this COVID times as well. But it's getting very interesting, particularly on the blockchain. There are few banks in the region. They are trying to explore use cases on the trade finance. There are few central banks who are trying to build B2B cross-border payments kind of an innovation with blockchain. For example, Project Ubin in Singapore and Thailand Central Bank. Even the recently Central Bank of Cambodia launched a retail-based payment system, real-time payment system, which has a blockchain flavor as well. They call it a Bokong system. So the region is trying to do POC and getting to support a lot of fintech coming in the region. But the key message here is payments or lending are the key things that are evolving. So moving to the next slide, here I've tried to give a picture of on the weights of what does some of these countries carry with respect to the number of fintech players operating the region. So I think the majority, I can see here, the majority of the fintech players in the ASEAN coming majorly from the ASEAN, focusing on payments, wealth management, alternate lendings. And then the second comes from the Indonesia of the obvious reasons. We know the potential there. So like I've mentioned, there's a lot of marketplaces that is coming up, alternate lending. There's a lot of unserved or underserved community that is there. And then mobile payments, the transaction value that are happening on the mobile with respect to payments is getting very high in Indonesia. So coming to Malaysia, we have a mix of both conventional and Islamic kind of a fintech players here. The key fintech players belong to the payment space. I personally see there around some 45 to 50 kind of a wallet players in Malaysia. Every other day we see a new e-wallet that is coming. And what is really interesting to see in Malaysia is there's a lot of P2P lenders, or digital P2P lenders that are coming up. The Securities Commission in Malaysia recently issued in the last year a few licenses, and some of them are doing very good. Philippines is again on payments. There's a lot of migrant workers in the Philippines who work abroad, and they because of them, there's a lot of inward remittance to Philippines. So we see an interesting Thailand in getting interesting with payments, and the regulator is quite supportive to push fintech innovation. And Vietnam, I think it's very close to my heart. I used to travel a lot for my work to Vietnam, and the kind of growth I've seen with respect to payments is getting very interesting. Even in the normal taxi or a Grab or an Uber drive, you can pay by using cards. You can swipe in the car itself. So these are some of the interesting numbers what we see in the ASEAN market. But on a high level, each of the country in ASEAN countries, they would like to promote or bring niche for their unique for each of this country. For example, Indonesia and Malaysia are trying to promote Islamic finance, Islamic way of financing as well, and Singapore on payments, Thailand blockchain, Vietnam again on payments. So there is a unique competency which each of these countries are trying to promote. So which is getting very interesting. And then the opportunity is quite big if any of the fintech wanted to explore to Southeast Asia or ASEAN countries. I'm personally helping some of the countries who want to come to ASEAN markets from Europe and Middle East. Currently, we help them get the license, help them identify what is the market opportunity for them, what license will fit based on the business model. So this is getting very interesting, the kind of people reaching and knocking our doors to get an insight of ASEAN markets is increasing on a day-to-day basis, which we see is a very positive sign. So moving on, this is to just to give a very good perspective of what is happening with respect to the digital payment space. I think as some of the attributes I've indicated on young savvy population, millennials, digital friendly. For example, if you take it Cambodia, 50% of the age population falls under near to 25 age group. So the mobile adoption is quite high. For example, in Malaysia, the mobile adoption is around 130%, so which is quite high. That's why we see many of the players within the region are launching super app kind of features. Recently, I'm having a similar conversation with one of my client in Vietnam. So they are getting aggressive to have a super app, both financial services and non-financial services kind of and use cases embedded in one platform that is getting increasing. Just to highlight some of the things here in the slide. So what is getting really interesting is this attribute, which is the digital payment user for total adult population. So the average you see around close to 50, so meaning around 50% of the population in some of the key markets in ASEAN are trying to use or embark on the digital payments journey. And then many of the central banks whom I closely work in the region, they're pushing for a lot of cashless economy. So what kind of strategies you have to put in place within your respective countries to drive from cash to cashless? How do you push digital payments, or how do you push debit cards? How do you put other kind of e-wallet transactions? So that is getting very interesting. And then you can also see the digital payments transaction value. The numbers are quite good. You can see the Indonesian numbers are very big because of the scale they have. And then if you look at the average digital payment value per user, it's for some of the countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand, it's almost there on an average. But if you look at Malaysia and Singapore, it is increasing very high. So this gives a real impression, or a view of what is happening with respect to the digital payments in these emerging countries of ASEAN market. And then I just wanted to give a little bit color on the Islamic fintech, although it's a topic on its own. But what we see globally, there is an increasing push for Islamic fintech as well. And Malaysia and Indonesia are one of the countries which are taking the lead. So globally, we see around some 150 plus on the global Islamic fintech side. And Malaysia and Indonesia combined will be around some 50 to 60 players. So what is interesting on the Islamic fintech side is there are few firms in Malaysia. They are trying to do blockchain-based solutions for fundraising or tax or donation, and then there increasing popularity happening with respect to wealth management on the Islamic side, crowdfunding, P2P lending. So interesting space. In fact, I hear Malaysia, I think many of you might be aware, the Central Bank of Malaysia is issuing a few new digital bank license, and this new digital bank license come from both conventional and Islamic side. So if it all happens, Malaysia would be one of the first countries which have with a framework for digital Islamic license. So there are few countries in the other parts of the globe, like in Saudi, UAE, or Qatar, or Bahrain, where there are neo banks or challenger banks. The word is used interchangeably. They are riding on the license of other banks, but this will be very interesting if a full digital Islamic license. I think this is going to be something really interesting in Malaysia market. So, I think the previous speakers mentioned a lot about the funding, so I don't want to cover too much. So, but I just wanted to paint a picture. Where is the real funding going in ASEAN? So, I think as no-brainer, Singapore leads the race with Vietnam. This is getting very interesting. You see Goldman Sachs investing in Momo. So there's a lot of investment happening in Vietnam, and then Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia. For example, recently there is a very popular remittance player here, Merchant Trade, that is got a very good funding from an investment bank, Kananga Investment Bank. So the space is getting really interesting. So if you look at the proportion of investment, majority is on the payments kind of players, then lending, and then gets distributed to insurance. For example, there is a good fintech player in Malaysia called Policy Street, who got a very good fundraising during the COVID times, as I've just mentioned. And then the other players with respect to personal finance, accounting technology, and other segments. So this is the distribution of the each dollar each dollar of investments that is going across the various verticals. So I think moving into the second part of the conversation, which I've asked to do, is how is the fintech and the banking collaboration is happening. So I personally see within the region there is a lot of collaboration, marriage, good conversations happening around the fintech on multiple areas, be it fintech, be it payments or lending, or some of them are also looking at, say, trade finance. Some of them are looking at loyalty-based solutions. Some of them are looking at claims management. How do we automate claims using AI? Now that's also getting interesting. And then the whole intention or the key fundamental attributes for the banks and the fintech collaboration or an insurtech collaboration in the ASEAN markets is precisely looking at what kind of new business models we can create with partner with fintech players. So for example, some of the insurance players in the market are collaborating with e-wallet players and launching micro insurance solutions, which is getting good. And some of the institutions are working on fintech solutions to increase the operational efficiency, reduce the transaction cost, and increase the customer experience. And then the whole disrupting the delivery challenge. I think the COVID has accelerated this whole process of digitization within the banks, and then everyone are in the scout for what kind of right fintech solutions that they can absorb to better enhance or serve their customers better. And then the fourth point is, as we all aware and conscious, how do we bring the strategic thinking, how we can bring the innovation within the organized learning and looking from how the fintech players are doing globally. And then going into the partnership specifically, what we see in Southeast Asia, or in fact, this is also a global perspective, is around these areas. So basically, recently we have done a survey of around some 300 plus entities across the globe on what are the fundamental areas where the marriage of fintechs and banks are happening. So precisely, we categorize these banks are champions, digital champions, or latecomers or followers. And then we see basically a majority of the collaboration is happening on the payment space, and then mostly on the authorization, eKYC, those kind of areas. And then a lot of wealth management. I think for some of the countries in the region, the personal finance management and personal finance management is not taken well by the young millennials and all. There is a lot of opportunity there. And then for the high level, high net worth, how do we bring the digital wealth advisory, so that is getting the collaboration. And then lending, there's a lot of marketplaces coming on. There are a lot of digital P2P lending, crowdfunding, um, um, invoice trading, invoice supply chain financing. There's a lot of lending kind of business that is happening. And then blockchain. So this, so far I see this is more at the POC stage. So I haven't seen a commercial product of a big scale yet in the market, but there is a very good prediction in ASEAN markets that blockchain will pick up nicely in the coming areas. So the key messages, I think the payments is the where the lot of marriage is happening between the banks and the fintech. And then I think I just wanted to cover, as we all know, the new norm with respect to the pandemic has changed many things. So banks are not operating to the full, and then account opening is not seamless. So basically what we see in the market is there are multiple functions or new competencies which the banks are trying to build because of the new norm. So basically many of them are trying to move towards a cashless payment, say how contactless payments. Say for example, all this PayPass or PayWave kind of how do we increase the limits of the contactless payments. I think for some of the markets I know the limit is very less. For example, in Malaysia it is around 250k RM, which is very less. So the industry is lobbying to increase the limits with the regulators, and I see many of the banks are moving towards the fully digital processes, be it onboarding, doing the credit scoring, or doing an underwriting on the fly and offer them products. So this is getting increasing, and some of the asks we are receiving from the banks are in this area of how we can move end to end, provide an end-to-end journey from customer onboarding onboarding till serving, offering a product, and then serving maintenance at a later stage, everything digitally. And then some of the banks we see globally and in the region, they're building portals for appointment bookings in the branches. Everyone are looking for a digital ID or eKYC. In fact, some of the markets in the region, they've issued the guidelines for eKYC, so all the banks and insurance companies have to embark on it. So that is getting increasing, and many of the banks we see they've launched their own social cost related platforms, fundraising kind of a platforms, be it on conventional side or Islamic side, for moving to the next or supporting the new norm. And then the whole thing about in this region is, I think there's a lot of fever with the digital banks that are coming in the market, being inspired from what is happening in UK, US, and Australia. Many of the countries within the ASEAN market. Hong Kong issued 8 new licenses. Currently in Singapore, it is in the process of evaluating who need to get the license. In Malaysia, I'm currently seeing around 40 to 50 applicants in the region who are aspiring for digital bank licenses. Soon we see it will come in Philippines, and Thailand might follow. So there's a lot of traction in the market, and many of these aspirants for the digital bank licenses come from the fintech players, so which is very interesting to see. And then coming from an adoption of a lot of technologies, I think as we all aware, many of them are looking at biometrics, voice banking. In fact, Citibank in the region, they use voice metrics for customer serving. Many of them are looking for fraud prevention image and speech recognition, and data mining and analytics. It goes without saying. So these are some of the functionalities. So in summary, I think I've almost there with my allocated time. So in summary, we see there is a lot of traction happening with respect to fintech and banks collaboration. But what we see will continue to evolve is many of the financial institutions in the region, they have started the fintech journey late, but they all wanted to embark on this journey very soon. They are taking to have an aggressive step. I see many of the corporates have launched their sandboxes, incubation centers, accelerator programs, which is getting very high both on the financial banking space and insurance space. And there are a few government-sponsored accelerators as well within the region. And then many of them, instead of just taking it for optics or something, they're really looking at what is the real business case, what kind of potential challenges that can be mitigated with all this fintech that's been evaluated. And lastly, on the blockchain, we see a good prediction. And then many of the regulators are getting interested to watch this space, and they're trying to bring the right regulation in scale. So I think with that note, I'll take a conclusion that there is a lot of action happening on the market, but we still see there is a lot of potential, and there's space for many other players to come to ASEAN markets. Look forward to address any questions now or later. Thank you.
Thanks, Gopal, for such an insightful session and giving us the whole landscape of digital banking in Southeast Asian countries. So now we are open up for question. Any questions? Okay, I can see a raise hand. Okay. So there's a question, Gopal, for you. Within the life insurance space, there are innovations happening around greater customer engagement through value-added services to enrich the core product proposition, especially within the boundaries specified by regulator. Besides micro insurance, are there other business models emerging within insurance?
So what we see in ASEAN markets is, apart from micro insurance, there's a lot of innovation that is happening in the micro insurance, different innovative products and cross collaborations. Apart from micro insurance, what I see pretty closely recent days is a telco assurance. How do telecom companies and insurance companies work together to launch innovative products? I've seen it very recently. One of the insurance company here worked with a telecom company to launch innovative products. Say, for example, every time you top up your mobile with say 100 rupees, so you get some percentage of cover on your insurance. So coming comparison of between life insurance and general insurance, we see majority of innovation is happening on the general side but less on the life side. But what we are seeing in the market is many of the insurance companies are looking at the digitization of the whole process, like customer onboarding till purchasing of a policy, be it life or general, and then doing some kind of an underwriting, and then issue the policy. And then later what we are seeing on the life side is some kind of fintech collaboration is happening on the claims automation. How do we reduce the fraud with respect to claims and all? So this is some of the conversations we are seeing in the market.
Thanks, Gopal.